In the late 1800s, when the Wild West was still rough and full of danger, a small town named Dry Creek sat under the hot Arizona sun. It was a dusty place surrounded by red hills and thorny cactus plants. Most days the air was filled with the sounds of horses' hooves, old wagon wheels, and the shouts of cowboys looking for work or trouble. The town had only one main street lined with a few wooden buildings, a blacksmith shop, a general store, a sheriff's office that was almost always empty, and 3 saloons. One of those saloons was the noisiest and roughest of them all. Its owner, Hank Roper, was a man who only cared about money. He was tall, thick-bearded, and always had a cigar between his teeth. Hank had a cruel way of running his place. He didn't care about right or wrong, only about profit. Outside his saloon hung a wooden sign with black letters burned into it. "Get your money back if the Apache woman doesn't please you." It was a terrible message, but no one in town said anything. People had grown used to such things in those lawless days. The woman mentioned on that sign was named Naya. She was young, quiet, and carried the calm strength of the desert in her eyes. Years ago, before she came to Dry Creek, Naya had lived peacefully with her tribe in the mountains. She had a family who loved her, and her laughter once echoed through the valley. But life had changed when trouble came to their land. She was taken away during a raid and brought down to the white towns, where people didn't see her as human but as something less. Since then, she had worked in Hank's saloon, serving drinks, cleaning tables, and listening to the drunken noise every night. She rarely spoke. Her face was calm, but her eyes told a story of pain and patience. Every night, cowboys and miners filled the saloon. The smell of smoke, dust, and whiskey mixed in the air. Men gambled loudly, throwing cards on tables while laughter and curses filled the room. Naya moved quietly between them, carrying glasses and bottles. She never looked anyone in the eye for too long. She had learned it was safer that way. But deep inside, she still carried something that no one could take away, a spark of hope. She didn't know what she was hoping for anymore. Maybe just one person who could see her not as a stranger, but as someone human. One late evening, when the sun had already set and the desert sky turned dark blue, the saloon doors creaked open. A man stepped in, tall, with a dusty coat and a worn hat that had seen many trails. His boots were covered in sand and his face looked tired but strong. His name was Jack Harlan. Jack had once worked as a scout for the army, guiding soldiers through the harsh land. He had seen many things in his life: battles, betrayal, and the cost of greed. He had grown tired of it all. Now he was just a wanderer, riding from one small town to another, searching for something peaceful he couldn't quite name. When he walked into Hank's saloon, the place was alive with noise. A group of cowboys shouted over a poker game, and Hank was behind the counter polishing glasses. Jack took a seat in the corner near the window. Naya approached quietly, her steps light as if she didn't want to disturb the air around her. "What'll it be?" she asked softly. Her voice was gentle but low, as if she hadn't spoken much in a long time. "Coffee?" Jack said. "If you've got any." Naya nodded and went to get it. Hank laughed when he heard. "Coffee in my saloon? You sure you're in the right place, cowboy?" Jack gave a faint smile but said nothing. When Naya brought the cup to him, their eyes met for the first time. It was only for a second, but in that look he saw something. Quiet sadness, strength, and a kind of dignity that stood out even in this rough world. "Who's she?" Jack asked after a moment. Hank leaned on the counter and grinned. "That there's the Apache girl. Best worker I've got. Can clean, serve, sing a little. Folks like her just fine. And if she don't please someone, well, they get their money back. That's the deal." Jack's jaw tightened. "That's a cruel thing to say," he muttered. Hank shrugged. "This is the Wild West, friend. Ain't much room for kindness out here." Jack didn't reply. He finished his coffee slowly, watching Naya as she moved about the room, always quiet, always careful. Something about her presence kept drawing his eyes back. She didn't look broken, even though the world had tried to break her. There was something unspoken in her, something that reminded him of the life he had lost, the kind of goodness that still existed beneath all the dust and pain. Later that night, as the saloon grew quieter and most of the men stumbled out into the street, Jack remained seated. He watched Naya clean the last table, her movements graceful despite her tiredness. When she noticed his gaze, she looked away quickly. "Why do you stay here?" he asked softly, not to accuse but with real concern. She hesitated before answering. Where else can I go? Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had no answer. The truth was, in this land, people like her had nowhere to go. Freedom was a word often spoken but rarely meant anything for someone without power or money. That night, Jack stepped outside and looked up at the sky. The stars were bright over the desert, countless silent witnesses to the things men did under their light. He leaned against the post and thought for a long time. He didn't know this woman, didn't know her past, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to cross her path for a reason. By sunrise, his mind was made up. He saddled his horse and rode to the trading post at the edge of town. There he sold a few of his belongings, a rifle, a silver pocket watch, and a small pouch of coins he had been saving for months. It was all he had. He gathered the money and returned to Dry Creek. When he pushed open the saloon doors again, Hank looked up with surprise. "You again? Back for another drink?" Jack dropped the pouch of coins onto the counter. The sound of gold made everyone turn. "I'm here for the girl," he said quietly. Hank laughed loudly. "You're joking, right? You want her for good? She's not for sale, cowboy. That's not how this works." Jack's voice stayed calm but firm. "Everything's for sale in this town, isn't it? Take the gold. Give her her freedom." The saloon went silent. The laughter died. For the first time, Hank didn't know how to respond. He picked up the pouch, weighing it in his hands. It was a lot of money, more than she had ever earned him in a year. After a long pause, he shrugged and grinned in his greedy way. "Fine. She's yours if you're that foolish." Jack didn't argue. He turned to Naya, who stood frozen, unsure what was happening. "You're free now," he said simply. "You can walk out of here if you want to." She didn't move at first. Her hands trembled slightly, and her eyes filled with disbelief. Freedom. It sounded like a dream she had stopped believing in. Hank shoved a piece of paper across the counter, a fake bill of sale, more for show than anything legal. Jack took it and nodded once. Then he walked to the door, waiting for her to follow. Slowly, Naya stepped forward. Every eye in the room watched her. Some of the men looked ashamed. Others simply stared. When she crossed the doorway, the hot desert wind touched her face. For a moment, she closed her eyes. She hadn't felt that kind of air in years, air that didn't belong to anyone. Jack walked beside her, silent. They didn't speak as they left the town behind. The sound of their footsteps fading into the distance. For the first time in a long time, Naya felt something stir inside her, something she had thought was gone forever. It was small, fragile, but real. It was hope. The desert morning was quiet when Jack and Naya left Dry Creek behind. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The cool air slowly turned warm as the day began. Naya walked beside Jack's horse, holding a small bag he had given her. Inside were a few clothes, bread, and a water flask. It wasn't much, but for her, it was the first thing she could call her own in years. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Jack could feel that she was nervous, and he didn't want to push her to talk. The sound of the horse's hooves and the soft rustling wind were enough. He rode slowly so she could keep up. Sometimes he looked at her from the corner of his eye, the way she walked quietly, her eyes scanning the wide-open land like someone trying to remember what freedom felt like. By noon, they reached a small stream that cut through the desert. Jack decided to stop there for rest. He tied the horse near the water and sat under a mesquite tree. Naya sat a few feet away, her hands folded in her lap. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was peaceful. "You can drink," Jack said gently. "The water's clean." She nodded and bent down to fill her hands with water. It was cold and fresh. As she drank, her reflection rippled across the surface. She barely recognized herself. Her face was thinner, her hair tangled from dust, but her eyes seemed brighter. After a while, Jack spoke again. "You don't have to come with me if you don't want to. I can take you anywhere you wish. Maybe your tribe." Naya shook her head slowly. "They're gone," she said softly. "Long time ago." Jack lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. There was nothing more to say after that. They both sat in silence, listening to the gentle sound of the stream. By evening, they continued their journey. Jack knew of an old trading post about 2 days away, abandoned now but still standing. He thought they could stay there until he figured out what to do next. He didn't have a plan. He only knew he couldn't leave her alone. When the sun dipped below the horizon, they set up a small camp. Jack gathered dry wood and made a fire while Naya watched, unsure if she should help. He noticed her hesitation and smiled. "You don't have to ask," he said. "You're free to do what you want." Those words made her eyes soften. "Free?" she repeated quietly, as if testing the sound. It was a word that felt strange on her tongue. She helped him prepare the fire and warm some beans from a tin. They ate quietly, and for the first time Naya smiled a little, not out of joy but because the silence between them felt safe. Days turned into weeks. They reached the trading post, a small wooden structure surrounded by dry brush. It wasn't much, the roof leaked a little and the floor creaked, but it was shelter. Together they cleaned it up. Jack fixed the roof while Naya swept the dust and made a small corner with blankets to sleep on. Every morning the sun rose over the valley, and Naya would step outside to watch it. She had spent years in darkness, and now she couldn't get enough of the light. She began to hum softly, little tunes she remembered from her childhood. Her voice was gentle, and when she sang, even the wind seemed to quiet down to listen. Jack would often sit by the door, carving wood or fixing his gear, listening without saying a word. Her songs reminded him of something long forgotten: peace. Slowly, trust began to grow between them. Jack taught her how to ride a horse properly, how to start a fire with just a spark, and how to find water in dry land. Naya, in turn, taught him things about the desert, where certain plants grew, how to tell when rain might come and which paths led to shade. They became a team, bound not by words but by quiet understanding. Sometimes, when Jack went to nearby towns for supplies, people would stare when they saw Naya waiting outside. Some whispered, some frowned, but Jack didn't care. He had seen enough hate in his life to know it wasn't worth listening to. One afternoon, as they sat near the fire, Naya spoke after a long pause. "Why did you help me?" Jack looked up from his work. "Because I couldn't walk away," he said simply. "I've seen too many wrong things. I didn't want to be part of it again." She studied his face for a moment and nodded slowly. "You're a good man," he smiled faintly. "I'm just trying to be." The days grew warmer, and with time, laughter began to return to their little camp. Naya started planting small patches of wildflowers near the trading post, and Jack teased her that they wouldn't survive the desert heat. But they did, tough, small, and bright, just like her. One evening, a storm rolled in. The wind howled across the desert, shaking the old building. Jack secured the door while Naya held the lamp steady. Rain poured down for hours, on something rare in that land. They sat close to the fire, listening to the thunder rumble in the distance. For the first time, Naya spoke about her past. She told him about her village, her father's laughter, and her mother's songs. Her voice trembled, but there was no bitterness in it, and only memory. Jack listened quietly, never interrupting. When she finished, he said softly, "They'd be proud of you, Naya." She looked at him, eyes glistening with tears, and nodded. But peace in the Wild West rarely lasted long. A few weeks later, trouble came riding back into their lives. One morning, as Jack was chopping wood outside, a cloud of dust rose from the distance. 3 riders approached fast. Naya stepped out of the cabin, fear flashing across her face. Jack narrowed his eyes, and he recognized one of them. It was Hank Roper, the saloon owner from Dry Creek. They stopped a few yards away. Hank's grin was gone, replaced by anger and pride. "You think you can steal from me and ride off, Harlan?" he shouted. "That woman was mine." Jack stood firm, his voice calm but sharp. "She was never yours, Hank. She's her own person now." Hank's face twisted with rage. "You're a fool, Cowboy. You can't just buy an Indian woman and call her free." Jack stepped forward, his hand resting near his belt but not drawing his gun. "I didn't buy her. I bought your greed off her back. Now ride away." For a moment no one moved. The air was heavy, the wind still. Then Hank cursed and signaled to his men. They reached for their guns. Jack reacted fast, diving for cover behind a barrel. The sound of shots cracked through the valley. Dust and smoke filled the air. When the noise stopped, Hank and his men turned their horses and fled, leaving one of them wounded and another's hat lying in the dirt. Jack stood breathing hard, a thin line of blood running down his arm from a graze. Naya ran to him, her face pale. "You're hurt," she cried. "It's nothing," he said, smiling weakly. "Just a scratch." She tore a piece of cloth from her shawl and pressed it against his arm, her hands trembling. "You shouldn't have fought for me," she whispered. He looked at her with a faint smile. I didn't fight for you. I fought with you. There's a difference. She didn't fully understand, but his words stayed with her. In the days that followed, Jack recovered slowly. Naya took care of him, cooking, tending to his wound, and sitting by his side every evening. Sometimes she sang to him softly, songs in her own language that carried through the quiet desert air. When Jack finally regained his strength, he stood outside one morning and watched the sun rise over the hills. The light spread across the land, touching everything with gold. Naya stepped out beside him. "You could leave now," she said quietly. "Go back to your life," he turned to her. "This is my life," he said. Years later, travelers passing through the valley would sometimes stop at a small ranch where flowers grew in the dry earth. They spoke of a quiet man with kind eyes and a woman with long dark hair, who sang in the evenings while the wind carried her song across the land. No one remembered the cruel sign that once hung in Dry Creek. All they remembered was the peace that lived in that valley, born from courage, kindness, and the will to do what was right. And in that lonely stretch of the Wild West, their story became a gentle reminder that even in a harsh world, goodness could still survive, and sometimes, it could bloom like a wildflower in the sand.